Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. This is another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live, and today we're going to be doing an Ask Me Anything live Q&A. Okay, so if you're a freight broker, a freight agent looking to get started as a freight broker or a freight agency, or you're looking to scale your business, you're looking to grow, you have questions about sales or otherwise, that's why I'm here today. This is the weekly free training that I do for my Freight Broker Bootcamp clients and the community in general. So well, here's where we're at, guys. This is another live. I hope you guys are excited. I'm going to wait for some people to get live. As you log in or as you sign in here to the stream, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. I'll do some here. So here's the agenda. Really, really simple. I'm going to do some quick shout outs. If you put your city and state, your name, city and state, put your name, city and state in there, and I'll give you a quick shout out. And then we're going to jump into live Q&A. But please hold your questions until we get to that part. Otherwise, they're going to get lost in the feed and you're never going to get an answer to your question. Okay. I'm streaming this on LinkedIn. I'm streaming it on Facebook, on YouTube. So, the comments for me come in pretty quick. We got some people jumping on live now. So hopefully we can get this show on the road. I hope you guys have some good questions. Again, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. I am based out of Buffalo, New York. And let me know, quick tech check. Can you guys hear me all right? Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. All right, cool. Sounds like you can because we've got Cynthia coming in from Maryland. Welcome. We got James coming in from Albany, New York. Welcome. Corey, as usual, bucking from Billings, Montana. We've got Phoenix from Paris, France. Love it. All the way from Paris. Perfect. Flawless. Thank you. I'm glad you guys can hear me okay. It's clear. Good. I just wanted to double check. We got Dave from Las Vegas. We got Chandra from North Carolina. We got Drew from Amarillo, Texas. Very cool. We got people from all over. We got Texas and we got North Carolina and we got Paris and we got Montana. It's pretty crazy. Well, listen, if you haven't heard before, I've had my Freight Broker Bootcamp startup training program, which is an online, self-paced, go at your own pace online course since 2009, right? So it's been 16, 17 years now. We've trained over 10,000 students. And we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. That program is well known to be the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program. So if you guys are at the stage where you're just kind of getting started and you want to collect some information and you want to see the step-by-step from A to Z on how to get set up as a broker or an agent, as well as how to start making some money, start moving some loads, the tech stack and dispatching and carriers and load boards and sales and all that. That's all included in the Freight Broker Bootcamp. So you guys can check that out again and just go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com or just search for Freight Broker Bootcamp. So back to the show here. Richmond, Virginia. Hey, include your name if you would. Multi999 from Richmond, Virginia. Joseph, let me put my glasses on here so I can see a little bit. Oh, wow. Holy cow. Amazing. We got Joseph checking in from Jersey. We got Brian from New Bedford, Massachusetts, or Taxachusetts. Yeah, well, I'm in New York, so I'm right there with you, man. We have some, it's Massachusetts, New York, and California have, I think, the highest taxes in the entire country by far. So it's pretty crazy. Thomas, hold your questions on scaling. Okay, hold your questions until I say go because they're going to get lost in the feed. We're going to do a couple more quick shout outs and then we'll get this show on the road. Okay, I know you were trying to time it perfect, so you were the first question, but I still got a few more shout outs and we'll go from there. We got Global Blueprint, Pontiac, Michigan. Okay, Global Blueprint LLC, JC. 1530. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me again. If you're catching this on replay, I'd love to hear from my replay folks. Hit me up in the comments with hashtag replay. I'd love to hear from you. I know sometimes you can't make it live. Even some of my faithful, devoted weekly listeners and people that join these streams. But ultimately, I do appreciate you guys being here. We're going to take another 60 seconds for some shout outs. We're going to let a few more people get live and then we're going to get the show on the road. Again, today we're going to be doing an Ask Me Anything Q&A. That means you can ask me anything. Now, I'll be upfront. I may not have the answer. I believe it or not, I don't know everything. But if I don't have the answer, I'll admit it and I'll try to point you in the right direction. I answer from my experience as an entrepreneur for over 30 years. I've built 4 different companies, 4 multi-million dollar companies in 4 different industries. Okay. My logistics company, my freight brokerage, I did over $200 million in sales. And then since then, again, I've trained over 10,000 students. It's closer to 20,000. I just stopped counting. So thank you for being here. And it looks like that's what we've got. Everything, the show's on the road here. All right. So if you have questions, I hope you have questions because the ball is now in your court. And Thomas apparently timed it perfectly with adding his question because we have no more shout outs. So if you have questions, hit me up in the comments. The ball's in your court now. I'm going to try to dedicate about a half an hour to this. So let's get through as many questions as we have. Sometimes we have more questions than we have time. We'll see how everything goes. But the first question is from Thomas. Let me remove those comments there. The first question is from Thomas. Any tips for scaling with new reps? Okay. So I'm going to make the assumption that you're kind of in a W-2 environment. You've got a sales team that you're growing, and you're looking to try to scale them from newbies and try to scale them through the different stages of their development and profitability, not only for you, but also for the company. So scaling with new reps. I think the biggest challenge, I'm going to start at the beginning. We're kind of starting out. The biggest challenge is that most W-2 freight brokerages have lousy sales training. And let's face it, the job is predominantly sales. Even if you're doing, cradle to grave brokerage where you're doing the sales and the operation side, and you have a cradle to grave model, it's still a very sales intensive business, right? You're selling to carriers, you're selling to shippers, you're selling to everybody, right? It looks a little different when you're selling to carriers versus shippers, but ultimately the point is they have really bad sales training. So I think one of the most important steps that a freight brokerage should have could be to have a very strong sales training curriculum, not just up front, but ongoing, whether that be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, some sort of structured program where you have sales training, where you can continue to develop your team from a skills perspective. You can address their shortcomings. I think that's a big one. Another thing I would strongly suggest is maybe using a tool like Gong, right? A tool that actually records your sales calls, and then you can go through using AI and you can identify objections. You can identify where your reps are getting stuck. You can identify where you're losing deals. And that could be a really powerful tool also. Now, beyond the sales training part, I think scaling, an individual rep, right? If you're looking to scale an individual rep, what's going to happen is they're going to run into a wall. Okay. So at a certain amount of freight and a certain amount of customers where they're moving a certain amount of loads per day, what happens is the brokers, if they're doing cradle to grave, they run out of time to prospect for new shippers because they're spending all their time covering freight for their existing customers, which makes total sense. And again, that's a high quality problem. But what happens is they stop prospecting because they're chasing their tail, moving freight too often. So there's a couple things you can do. Number one, leverage technology to make their job easier so that they can scale further from the operational perspective. Again, we got a lot of TMSs, we got a lot of AI products that are designed to save brokers time, particularly on the operation side. So that's one thing you could look at. The other side of it, if you get a broker that's to a point where he just is bursting at the seams and he doesn't have the time to prospect any further, my suggestion would be you could build a team around him, have him build his own pod. So for example, he's the lead broker, and maybe now you hire somebody into kind of an assistant or an operational perspective that's going to take some of the operational stuff off their table, off their plate, so that they can then continue to focus on the sales side. They've already proven they can get customers. And what I think is this: it's way easier to do the operational side of this business or to teach the operational side of this business than it is the sales side of this business, right? If we hired 100 salespeople and 100 operations people, right, and you trained them both, you're going to have a much higher stick rate and success rate on the operational side than you will the sales side. So that's another consideration, is you could start building they could start building a pod around them where they could become, more the mentors and trainers, and then that would allow them to scale their book of business and the book of business for the company. So those are a couple of ideas. If you have a follow-up, let me know. Welcome, Humphrey from Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Amzo from Juliet, Illinois. Welcome. Okay, a couple more questions here. Is being a freight broker still strong field to go into? I have 20 years CDL driving experience, but I want to swap it up and look to see if it's worth it. I believe it is, but let me explain to you why. Two things. Number one, the global, you think about freight brokerage, not just domestically or locally in your region, because we have a tendency to look at things from the lens of our local perspective. So if we don't see a lot of manufacturing in our area, we think that logistics is dying, right? But think about it on much more of like a macro level, right? Think about it from the US, think about it from North America, think about it from a global perspective. Logistics continues to grow. Why? It continues to grow because the population continues to grow. It continues to grow because of innovation. It continues to grow because of housing needs. It continues to grow because the global economy continues to grow over time. So think about it from that perspective. So it's not a dying industry, it's a growing industry, right? And so there are ebbs and flows like every industry, and some regions grow faster than others, but the US is probably the logistics hub of the world from a spend perspective, right? So yeah, I believe it's a great opportunity. Now, let's address your situation being a driver. I think you're in the perfect spot. Here's why. I think drivers make incredible brokers. Why? Because you know exactly what it takes to pick up and deliver a load on time with no problems. You also understand the challenges associated with that, and you can not only predict those challenges, but you could actually address those challenges because you've solved them in the real world from the ground, okay? So you've got a lot of hands-on experience that I think bodes very well for freight brokerage. Now, are there things you're gonna have to learn? Sure, but you have the lingo, you have a network, you have the experience. So I think someone who's been a CDL driver like yourself, who's been on the road and understands it from the inside out, I think it's extremely powerful. And I think you have a huge opportunity for success if you could leverage a few of those tools. So I hope that helps. Good question. Freight Hustler, welcome, Richmond, Virginia. All right, should I call the cell phone number of a contact on Apollo or just stick with the company office phone number? Well, if you can get somebody on the phone at their office, great. If you can't, use the cell phone. I mean, this is a contact sport, right? So your real question is, I think your underlying question is a prospect going to be pissed off if you call their cell phone number? Some may not. The reality is, if they have their cell phone number, that means they've published it somewhere. And it's not on a do not call list because it wouldn't be published on Apollo or on any lead source if it was, right? So yeah, I think, again, it's a contact sport. Whatever contact information you have, whether that be their physical location, whether that be their email, whether that be their LinkedIn profile, whether that be their cell phone, whether that be their business phone, their office phone. Yeah, I would use any of those channels. And then, as a matter of fact, I would use all of those channels and build what I call, what they call a sales cadence using a multi-channel outreach approach where we would use all those channels to break through the noise. Let me give you an example. If you and I were sitting side by side and we had 100 of the same leads, okay, a list of the same 100 prospects of shipping managers for these companies, and you just picked up the phone and called all 100 of those, and I picked up the phone, called all 100, sent an email to all 100, connected with all 100 on LinkedIn. Who do you think would start more conversations with those 100 people? Ding, 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 ding. Me, of course, right? Because I'm creating more touch points. I'm creating more opportunities to start those conversations. So I hope that helps. Dennis, in your experience, what differentiates an agent who closes 2 to 3 loads a day from one who consistently reaches 10 plus? Is it mindset, system, niche selection, or something else? Good question. Very good question. So let this marinate for a second. Let me just think this through. The difference between an agent who's moving 2 or 3 loads a day from an agent who's moving 10 plus a day, is it mindset, systems, niche selection, or something else? Okay. So here's what I think. Number one, I think that mindset is incredibly important. Now, I'm not Tony Robbins, and I'm not, here to have you walk on coals or do any of that, right? I mean, I'm not a woo-woo guy. But what I have realized over my career is that everything starts with mindset, right? And what I mean by that is if you have a positive mindset, if you have a growth mindset, then you are much more likely to have success. Again, if we put those two people together, same 100 leads, same skill level, one has a positive mindset, one has a negative mindset, the positive with the person with the positive mindset is going to win more statistically, right? So I think everything starts with mindset. And within my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, this is a good time to kind of chat about that. In my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program, which is that 8-week live coaching and mentoring program that I have, believe it or not, the first module, the first week, the foundation of that is where we talk about mindset, because some people struggle with fear of rejection and fear of cold calling and fear of what people might think, right? So we deal with that from a mindset perspective. If you guys want to get on the wait list for that, just go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. Again, the program's not free. It's not cheap, but it's worth every penny exponentially because the return on investment can be huge. So everything starts with mindset, okay? So the second part of your question, let me just get back to it here. Okay. Mindset. So I think it starts with mindset. The second part of this is obviously skills. Do you have the skills? Do you have the sales skills predominantly in order to secure new shippers and to upsell yourself into existing shippers, kind of the land and expand approach, right? You move one load. How good are you at moving one load and then turning that into 10 loads and then turning that into 100 loads, right? But that's all sales. Do you have the skills? Do you have a proven sales system? That's what my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator is all about. So I think it starts with mindset. I think having strong sales skills, there's a lot of other variables that go in that, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Sales cures all. Okay. Sales cures all. So my answer to your question is, I think there's a variety of things, but if I had to point to one and I could only pick one, okay, I would probably say sales skills. Of course, there's technology. Of course, picking a good niche. Of course, your work ethic. Of course, your attitude. All of those things apply. But if I had to point to one and I was forced to just pick one, I would probably pick sales and the skills associated with that. So hope that helps. Good question. Okay. Hi, most shippers pay from 30 to 60 days. How can I get money faster with the factoring company? Could you please explain how this works? Okay, factoring is very simple. Well, it's simple once you understand it. Let me explain this to you. Here's how factoring works. You as a freight broker have a factoring company, which is a company that is kind of like a specialized financing company. And what happens is you move a load, you then assign that invoice to the factoring company. Basically, you're kind of selling that invoice to the factoring company. So you move a load today, the load delivers. You will then send proof of delivery proof of delivery over to the factoring company. The factoring company and the rate confirmation, and the factoring company will forward you, will advance you typically 90 to 95% of that invoice. So if it was $1,000 to the shipper, they're going to forward you 900 to 950 back. And you use that money to pay the carrier. So you're typically able to get that in 24 to 48 hours. Okay. Now what the factoring companies do is they're going to invoice your shipper. Okay. And then once that shipper pays the invoice back to the factoring company, what's going to happen is the factoring company is going to keep their 2 or 3% fee, and then they're going to send you back the difference. So you will get you'll get more money back on the back end from the factoring company. So think of it like a cash advance, right? Think of it kind of like a cash advance or something along those lines. It's not cheap, but the reality is it creates positive cash flow so that you can build your, so you can pay your carriers on time, so you can build your credit, so you can have that money not only to pay the carriers, but use that for some of your operational expenses. So I hope that helps. If you got a follow up, let me know. What's the ideal daily routine for a high performance freight agent? How should someone structure their day to maximize loads booked and relationship building? Okay. So a high volume, high performance broker is going to spend probably 90% of their time, 80 to 90% of their time operationally, which means they're going to be quoting lanes. They're going to be, which involves research. They're going to be posting loads. They're going to be taking calls from carriers. They're going to be calling carriers. They're going to be communicating with the carriers. They're going to be sourcing carriers. They're going to be negotiating with carriers, right? So the majority of the time, and then they're going to be following up on, on deliveries, making sure that everything got delivered, getting a, proof of delivery so that they can get paid, so they can start invoicing. So there's a lot of operational responsibility when you are a high volume broker or high volume agent. Okay. So how that would work, typically you come in the morning, right? You come in the morning, you see what loads have to be covered, right? And you're covering that freight. You got to make sure that that freight gets covered, right? You're also checking in on all of your existing loads to make sure that they picked up or delivered, right? Anything that's pending. So you're doing a lot of follow-up on the loads that you already have. So the majority of your time is spent there. The best brokers, the best agents are going to dedicate some time throughout the day, whether that be 1 or 2 hours a day, to prospect or to network and develop relationships with new prospects. Okay. So you have to keep the funnel full, because here's what happens just through natural attrition. You will lose shippers. Sometimes you'll lose a shipper, you'll lose a client because you screwed up. It happens. It happens to all of us. I've done it. Everybody's done it. Sometimes you'll lose shippers because the shipper screws up and nobody wants to take responsibility. Sometimes you'll lose shippers because the person, your primary contact, gets fired. Sometimes you'll lose shippers because that company will get acquired by another company and they've already got an in-house or they've already got other vendors. So there's a variety of reasons how you can lose shippers. So just through natural attrition, you're going to lose a certain amount of clients over time. So you have to keep your funnel full. You have to always be prospecting to backfill those clients. Okay. Now, again, if you have some operational constraints from a time perspective, this is when you need to start kind of delegating that to someone who's an assistant of yours that you can hire that will take off some of that operational responsibility, like, posting loads and sourcing carriers and dispatching and following up on PODs. Those are all things you can teach somebody to do. If you really want to scale from there as an agent or as a broker, you need to focus on the sales side. So I don't think there's any hour by hour perfect fit, but I think from a percentage standpoint, what you're going to see is 80 to 90% of your time is going to be spent operationally, and the rest of it will probably be spent on sales. Alex asks, any suggestion on how not to lose your mind while waiting for RFQ feedback? Supposed to get one today before lunch and can't wait. Alexander, I get it, man. I mean, number one, you spend a lot of time and energy doing, RFPs and RFQs where you're doing 100 or 200 or 300 or 500 lanes, and you're quoting on a bunch of those lanes for specific shippers. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of resources. And so it creates a lot of anxiety because you want to get a return on that investment. And if you don't, it's like, damn, what happened, right? I spent all those hours doing that RFQ or RFP, and I didn't get any return on my investment. Here's what you have to understand. Most RFQs, you're going to lose. You're not going to win a whole lot on most RFQs, depending upon the company that you are. If you're a smaller broker, you're not going to win very many RFQs. That's why I highly recommend smaller brokers focusing on small to medium shippers as opposed to the Fortune 1000 brands with the big RFQs, right? Those big companies have a very bureaucratic process. The sales cycle can be very, very long. The vetting process can be very arduous. And, a lot of times they want to keep you at arm's length because they don't want your ability to develop a relationship to skew their decision. So it becomes much more numbers driven, right? And so it takes a lot of the sales nuance out of it. That's what they want, right? So I don't recommend that smaller brokers really go after big RFPs, right? Especially newer, smaller brokers. Focus on small to medium-sized shippers. Much easier to get in touch with them, much easier to communicate and build relationships with them, much easier to navigate that sales process, much easier from a vetting perspective, much more flexibility on pricing. So yeah, I hope that helps. If you got a follow-up, let me know. Lots of questions. I have a freight brokerage business and I hold my CDL. I want to get my carrier authority in case I may need to drive. What is the best thing to do business-wise? Okay, well, it sounds to me like you already have a plan. I'm going to tell you that you thinking that you having one truck is going to actually make a difference in your freight brokerage growth, I just think you're a little bit off track. If you're looking to build a freight brokerage and that is going to be your goal, you want to build a real freight brokerage, having one truck with one driver is not going to be the difference as to whether you are successful or not. But here's what I will tell you will make a difference. When you try to split your focus and do both, because we both know running a carrier business and running a brokerage business are very different. There is some crossover, but they're very different, okay? And the money that you're going to spend as a carrier could be invested into your brokerage and have a much bigger return on investment. So I'm not sure that this is the answer you were looking for, but this is the answer I'm going to give. If you got a follow-up, let me know. Sorry, hold on a second. I'm looking for, I lost track here for a second. Okay, here we go. I want to transition from dispatching to freight agent, and I can't find a broker who's willing to hire me. Any tips on how to find someone? Yes. My suggestion to you is get on LinkedIn. Okay. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. There are a lot of agent recruiters on LinkedIn posting content, having conversations with potential agents. Now, I understand that you don't have any experience as a broker, but you do have experience as a dispatcher. So you have that, you can bring that to the table. You've got the relationship. You've got those relationships with carriers. You've got that experience working on load boards. You've got relationships with brokers, right? So the fact is that you have a great opportunity to get hired as an agent, but here's what you don't do. Don't go out to the largest freight brokerage that are posting job ads, okay? You're probably not going to get hired by them because most of the large brokerages that have an agent program, like my old company, Logistic Dynamics, which I sold back in 2016, they're going to require you to have a book of business, okay? The larger company, most of the larger brokerage, agency-based brokerages are going to require you to have a book of business, but there are tens of thousands of brokers, small to medium-sized brokers that are doing $1 million to $3 million to $5 million to $10 million, right? Of the small brokerages that would love to scale their business, especially considering they don't want to go out and spend $60 or $80 or $90,000 on a salary and all the benefits, and then hope that that person works out, because you as an agent will work on straight commission. And the only time they pay you is when you bring something to the table. So I think LinkedIn would be a great resource for you. I think focusing on smaller brokerages, particularly if they're local to you, where you can go out and meet them and have lunch and have a real conversation. If you can't do that, then work your way outwards. The phone and email are your friend. LinkedIn is your friend. But I think here's what I'm going to tell you. And I'm just going to give it to you brass tacks. If you make a list of 50 small to medium-sized brokerages, okay, particularly if they're focused on the agent business model, which there are many of them now, okay, and you make a list of 50 and you call and email all 50 and you have a conversation with all 50 of those people, I'll bet you $1,000 to your $1 that you get at least one opportunity to work as a freight agent without a book of business starting. Okay. Just using your experience, just using the value proposition of there's zero risk. And the only time they're going to have to pay you is when you bring a customer to the table. It's a very compelling value proposition for any small brokerage that wants to scale. So I hope that helps. How much time we got here? Okay. Close to half an hour here. As a broker, if I have the cash, can I essentially factor myself, use my own cash? Yeah, well, it won't be factoring. You're just self-financing. Yeah, I mean, if you have your own cash, then you can use that cash. That's what some brokerages do. If you have a foundation of cash that you're willing to turn over in the business, meaning, you're going to put it in the business and you're going to use it for cash flow to pay carriers, right? Then that's great. That's ideal. That's the best way to go if you can, because it's the lowest cost. Let's just think about it. If you had $1 million book of business, all right, on $1 million a year, if you have to factor, that's 2 to 3%. That's 20 to 30K off the top in factoring cost. But if you built $1 million book of business and you self-financed, then you wouldn't have any of that cost, other than maybe whatever, if it's on a line of credit, in that line of credit, maybe you're paying 6% interest, which is, what is that? I'm not very good at math. What's that? About 0.5% per month, right? Right. So 0.5% per month in interest compared to 2 or 3% per invoice, right? So it's a way lower cost basis. So yeah, if you can self-finance, that is the best way to do it. That's what we did. I've never used factoring, but I have hundreds and hundreds of students that have, and they've used it successfully, and they use it through that startup growth period until they build up some reputation, experience, and history with a bank, and then they'll go to the bank, and then that bank will give them a line of credit based on the receivables, and then that's what they use to self-finance. So hope that helps. But that usually takes a couple years of operations. Oops, hold on. Okay, does it help if you know some drivers? Do you work with owner-operators mostly, or businesses that have people driving for them? It's going to be a mix of the two, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Knowing drivers has some benefit, but here's the reality of how a freight broker works. The way a freight broker works, typically, and the way I teach it, is you are going to start from the shipper side. And what I mean by that is you are going to build your carrier relationships based upon your shipper demand. So if I'm focusing on the flatbed niche, and I'm focusing on companies in New York, right? I'm going to focus on carriers, building my carrier base that have flatbed trucks that are in New York, right? That have their trucks in New York, not necessarily based out of New York, but maybe their trucks, they have a lane that runs through New York where they have equipment there, and they're looking for freight there. And I'm going to build my relationships around flatbed carriers that are in New York. Okay. Because if I'm focusing on flatbed freight in New York, it doesn't matter if I have an owner operator that runs a reefer out of Florida, because it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me support my niche. So I'm a big fan in find the shippers and develop your carrier relationships around that niche, whatever that niche is. If it's flatbed freight in New York, if it's van freight out of the Northeast, like I started with, you can always expand into other niches, which will also allow you to expand into other types of carriers, other equipment, other regions, other geography. So I hope that helps. Where can we get business on day one? Well, if you're expecting to get clients day one, I want to be honest with you, it's probably not going to happen. Okay. Not unless you have a network of people that you've already done business with that have a need. So it's very unusual for a new broker to get business day one. Now, I do have clients that have done, like I had a client, Elio Longoria, who did over $7,000 in profit his first week with no experience in brokerage. It does happen, but I will tell you, it's rare. So it's possible, but unusual. Typically, if you're going to get business day one or week one, it's going to be somebody that you already know. Now, maybe don't have a background in freight or logistics or trucking, but maybe you know somebody that is in the manufacturing space or in the distribution space or in the warehouse space, and you have a relationship there that you could call on. And based upon that level of trust, that's probably where you're most likely to get business early on. But the problem with that is that most people have a fairly small network and they're going to run through that network very quick. And if they don't get clients from that network, then what do they do then? That's where you need the skill and the systems to sell. You need the skill and the system to be able to reach out to a cold prospect via email, via LinkedIn, face-to-face, and a walk-in. You need those skills if you truly want to build that business. And again, coming back to the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, which I'm going to show you again because I know, okay. If you guys want to get on the wait list for the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. Again, I've had over 1,000 clients go through that sales mentoring program. And at the end of that, we have an exit survey. And the rating after they complete the program is a 9.2 out of 10. I mean, I'm not making it up. That's as good as I can get. I would have loved a 7, would have been ecstatic with an 8. We got a 9.2. So the program works. Many of those clients have went on to build 6, 7, 8-figure freight brokerages. But we've been very, very fortunate. So if you want to get on the wait list for that, that is an 8-week live coaching and mentoring program specifically towards sales. This is not for people that are just looking to learn how to become a freight broker. It's not for people that are just looking to learn how to become a freight agent. For that, you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com, which is my startup online course. The Sales Accelerator is actually a coaching program where I work with you and teach and transplant that piece of my brain into your head and help you implement it into your business over an 8-week period. So if you want to get on the wait list for that, if you're lacking in sales skills or you're lacking in sales confidence or you're lacking in having a proven system, get on the wait list. I'm going to be opening it up soon. I know it's been delayed. I was hoping I was going to open up enrollment by now. All I can tell you is hold tight. It's going to be another 2 to 4 weeks. I took on a project that I didn't realize was going to take as long as it is, but I got to finish up this project before I dive into that because it's too much time intensive. So yeah, if you guys want to be notified when spots open up, get on the wait list. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Let me see what we got. Let me see. Okay, here's a question. What criteria do you suggest for agents to follow to choose a niche? I teach a 4-prong approach to finding a niche. You can define your niche by, industry or product. You can define your niche by equipment type. You can define your niche by geography. Or what I recommend is you do what I call number 4, which is a hybrid. Now, a hybrid is where you take 2 or more of those other categories and you combine them. Let me give you an example. When I first started my freight brokerage back in 2003, what we did is we focused on van freight, Northeast outbound. So if it picked up in New York, PA, New Jersey, all the way through up New England, if it originated in that corridor and it was going west or south and it was going in a van, that was our niche. So we built a list of all the different types of companies that used vans to ship their freight, whether that be bottled beverages, whether that be paper products, whether that be some building supplies, whether that be whatever, right? Whatever products, anything that was on a pallet, right? So we built our niche around that. And then eventually we strategically expanded into refrigerator and we expanded into flatbed and we expanded into other regions, but we focused on that niche, Northeast outbound van freight. when one of my salespeople or one of my clients came to me or one of the prospects came to me and said, hey, I've got freight coming out of Regina, Saskatchewan, and it's going to the port in Houston. Can you help? My answer was no. Why was my answer no? Because I wanted to focus specifically on that niche, because focusing on that niche allowed me to understand the dynamics of that market. It allowed me to understand what shippers are there, what lanes are moving, what carriers are there, what are the rates, what are the challenges associated with the Northeast that I don't run into in Regina, Saskatchewan. So I became an expert in that Northeast corridor van freight before I ever moved on to other types of equipment or other regions, if that makes sense. So I hope that helps. Let's see here. Yeah, we're running over here. Let me look. Okay, question. When approaching new shippers, what metrics matter most to them today? Reliability, capacity, speed, or cost savings? What is the strongest pitch angle? It's going to vary from company to company. You have to pick what you're going to do. What is your strategy? Is your strategy to be the cheapest and focus exclusively on rate and try to be the Walmart and make $50 a load? If that's your strategy, then you focus on cost. That's not where I go, and that's not what I would recommend. So all of the things that you mentioned are important. There's no one thing that I can point to that all shippers are going to be focused on. It's going to vary. So what you have to learn is you have to learn to identify what's most important to them and then build your sales approach around that. Because if someone's focused on reliability, right, and they're really concerned about everything has to pick up on time, deliver on time with no issues or claims, then you focusing on being the cheapest is not going to win you the business, because they know that the cheapest is never synonymous with the best. Okay. So you're going to create more friction focusing on price when they're focused on reliability. Okay. So if you find a shipper that's exclusively focused on price, here's what I tell you. And this is what I have told every shipper that I've ever had that conversation with. If you're focused exclusively on price, and that is the biggest variable in your decision-making process, I'm probably not your guy. But let me explain to you why. I've had lots of customers, and they're always willing to pay me a little bit more. Now, if you want me to explain why they're willing to pay me a little bit more, I'll be happy to go into that. And if they say, yeah, I'd love to hear that, they just invited me to sell them. If they say, no, price is the only variable that I'm looking for, then I say, thank you very much. You have my number. Exit stage left. Okay. I'm not going to waste my time with someone exclusively focused on price, because I don't want to spend 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 calls and emails back and forth and find out that I have to be the cheapest in order to win the business, because you don't need to do that. That's not how you build a successful freight brokerage, trying to focus on being the cheapest. That is not the winning scenario. So I hope that helps. And listen, that's going to wrap it up for today. Appreciate you guys being here. Listen, if you learned anything from this live, do me a huge favor. There was no credit card required to join the live. Hit the like button, share the stream, right? Appreciate you guys being here. Alyssa, again, hit the like button no matter where you're at. If you're on LinkedIn, hit the like button and repost. If you're on Facebook, hit the like button and share. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Listen, I've got over 80,000 subscribers. We've got probably 500 plus videos in my YouTube channel. And again, for those of you that are curious about becoming a freight broker, right? If you're just curious about becoming a freight broker and you're just in the early stages and you want to know the step-by-step, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com, trained over 10,000 students. And again, we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. Can't make it any easier than that. If you're already a broker or an agent and you're in that phase where you're looking to really ramp things up and start things up, and you're looking for a sales process, you're looking for a sales coach, you're looking for a sales mentor, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. You can get on that wait list, and it will be opening up soon. The best I can tell you is sometime in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Okay. I know I've been saying that for a while, and I apologize, but hang tight with me. I will send out the text and the email. You guys will all get an opportunity. Just know those spots are very limited. I've got over 1,000 people on the wait list, and typically I max that out at like 20 people. Okay. Just because it's so time intensive, right? And I really want to be able to spend a lot of time with that smaller group. So if you get on the wait list, you're going to get a great opportunity to learn more about that once I open up. Appreciate you guys being here. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. You guys had some great questions today. I'll be back next Monday for the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.